A deafening roar shook the bridge of the starship. Sparks flew as the hull cracked, and the alien princess clung to the console, her long silver hair whipping around her face. "Hold the shields!" she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. The dark fleet of shadow cruisers had caught them in an ambush near the belt, a place where no human dared to travel. Her eyes scanned the chaos, searching for the one figure who could turn the tide. Then she saw him. A human, lean, rugged, and standing at the edge of the blast, weapon in hand, as if daring the entire fleet to strike. His presence was impossible, yet undeniable. Her chest tightened in a strange, aching recognition, a memory she had long buried. The ship jolted violently. Panels exploded and fire hissed across the floor. She stumbled toward the human almost instinctively. "You can't, he's too strong," her advisor cried, gripping her arm. But she tore free, her instincts screaming that he was the key, the one who could save them all. The human turned, meeting her gaze. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. His eyes, warm, unwavering, looked directly at her, and in that instant the princess knew. She had seen him before, not in this life, not in this time. He had saved her once, long ago, in a memory that no one else could recall. A missile struck the ship's rear engines. The floor beneath them cracked, sending both of them sliding across the deck. The human caught her by the arm, pulling her from the edge of a burning chasm. "Princess, move!" he shouted over the roar of the explosion. His grip was firm, certain, and somehow comforting amidst the storm of chaos. As they tumbled to safety, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I know you." The human's eyes narrowed, scanning her face, his jaw tight. "You shouldn't," he said, though there was a flicker of recognition in his own expression. "Not yet." A siren blared, signaling another incoming strike. The princess's heart raced as she realized the gravity of their situation. Her fleet was scattered, their defenses broken, and yet in that moment, staring at the human who had appeared out of nowhere, she felt a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. Memories began to stir, fragments of a past life, a distant planet, a battlefield she could barely remember. A young human had once risked everything to save her from certain death. She had been too small, too naive to understand the sacrifice at the time. Now, standing before him, the echoes of that past came rushing back, and tears blurred her vision. The human grabbed a plasma rifle from a fallen crew member. "Stay close," he barked, scanning the burning corridor. "I don't know how long we have." Her hands shook as she reached out. Why are you here?" He looked at her, a strange mix of determination and sorrow in his gaze. "Because you called me, even before you knew it." The first enemy ship broke through the shield, and the corridor was bathed in blue-white light as lasers cut through metal. The human pulled her behind a support beam just in time. She felt the heat of the blasts on her back, smelled the ozone and smoke, and for the first time in decades she felt alive, terrified, yes, but alive. Her mind raced, torn between the reality of the present and the memory of the past. She had thought the human lost forever, a ghost from an era she could barely recall. Yet here he was, older, battle-hardened, yet somehow the same. His presence was a lifeline, a promise that survival was possible. "Princess," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I need you to trust me. We're not getting out of here if you hesitate." She swallowed hard, nodding. In that split second, she knew that whatever her doubts, whatever the danger, she would follow him. Not just because he was a human, a species she had been taught to fear, but because he had saved her once. And now, perhaps, he would save her again. The ground shook violently, throwing them both against the wall. Debris rained down. Through the smoke and fire, the princess's gaze locked on his, a silent promise passing between them. The battle had just begun, but for the first time she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could survive. And deep in her heart, an undeniable truth echoed. He was her savior, from long ago and perhaps for now. The corridors of the starship groaned under the assault. Fires licked the walls, smoke curling into the low gravity like angry serpents. The princess clung to the human's arm as he led her through a shattered passage, his eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. Each step was a gamble, each second could be their last. "Why didn't anyone warn us about this fleet?" she gasped, her silver hair plastered to her sweat-soaked face. He didn't answer immediately. His mind was moving faster than any words could keep up with. He had survived countless battles, but there was something different about this fight. This was not just another skirmish, it was personal. Every movement he made, every decision, was shadowed by a memory he had buried, a promise he had made long ago to a frightened girl who had no one else to protect her. Finally, he said, because they didn't think anyone could survive it, but you're not just anyone. The princess blinked, confused. I'm what, not just anyone? Not to me, he said, his voice quiet but unyielding. You're the reason I'm here. They rounded a corner, and the sight that greeted them made her stomach twist. A section of the ship's central hub had been ripped open. Flames leapt from broken conduits, and pieces of the ceiling had collapsed into the corridor. Beyond that, the shadow cruisers hovered outside the shattered hull, firing relentlessly. The sound of metal tearing through metal was deafening. Hold on, he said, gripping her hand tightly. I know a way out. As they ran, the princess's mind raced. The memory of her childhood flashed before her eyes. She had been trapped on a dying planet, surrounded by enemies she couldn't understand. She had been screaming, panicked, when a human appeared from the smoke, fighting off soldiers far stronger than himself. He had lifted her into his arms and carried her to safety. She had barely known him, but she had felt a connection, a lifeline, a hope she could not explain. And now, decades later, standing on the edge of death once more, she realized it was him again, the same human. His presence was more than a coincidence, it was destiny. The human led her to a maintenance hatch, hidden behind the wreckage. Through here, he said, pointing to the dark passage. It's dangerous, but it's our only chance. She hesitated. Are you sure? His eyes softened just for a moment. I promised you once, I'll do it again. They crawled through the narrow, dimly lit tunnel, the hum of the ship's failing systems vibrating around them. Sparks rained down from above, and the princess flinched every time a loose panel threatened to fall. But he moved with a steady confidence that kept her anchored. Why me? She whispered, her voice trembling. Why did you save me before? He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Because you mattered, and because I saw something in you, a fire no one else could see. The words sent a shiver down her spine. She realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that humans were not just fragile creatures. They were capable of courage, loyalty, and love that reason. This one human in particular was proof of it. Suddenly the tunnel shook violently. Explosions rocked the ship. They were close, too close, and the enemy forces were adapting faster than they could escape. The princess fell to her knees, coughing from smoke and dust. The human knelt beside her, pressing a hand to her back. Get up, we're almost there. With effort she rose, leaning on him. I remember, she said, her voice shaking. I remember your face, and the day you saved me I never forgot. He gave her a brief, almost imperceptible smile. Then you know why I'm here, we finish this together. As they emerged from the maintenance tunnel, they entered the upper decks, where the chaos was at its peak. Alien soldiers clashed with their own defenses, and the air was thick with smoke, heat, and desperation. The human took a deep breath, scanning for their next move. Stay behind me, he said, voice steady, commanding. We're not done yet, not by far. The princess nodded, determination hardening her resolve. She had thought humans were fragile, that they would crumble under pressure. But this human was different. He was her savior once, and now he was the key to survival, to victory, and perhaps something more she could not yet name. Above them, the starship shuddered as another missile tore through the outer hull. Fire and smoke filled the corridors, yet they pressed forward. For the first time in her life, the princess didn't just feel fear, she felt hope, because she was not alone. And in the human's steady, unwavering presence, she realized the truth. She had been waiting for him even before she knew it herself. The upper decks were a battlefield of fire and chaos. Sparks rained from shattered ceilings, and the acrid scent of burning circuits filled the air. Alien soldiers and automated defense drones clashed with the enemy in a deadly dance, the screams of the wounded echoing through the corridors. The princess kept close to the human, her heart pounding in time with the distant explosions. Split up, the human barked, pointing toward a doorway leading to a control hub. We need the navigation core if we're going to escape this mess. She nodded, trusting him implicitly, even as doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind. Memories of past betrayals had taught her to be cautious. Yet there was something in the human's eyes, steady and unwavering, that pushed her forward. She had been saved before, and she believed she could be saved again. As they raced through the corridors, a sudden shadow moved across the doorway ahead. An enemy officer, larger than most, stepped into view. His armor gleamed black under the emergency lights, and in his hand was a weapon unlike any she had seen, a plasma lance capable of tearing through hull plating like paper. The human froze for just a moment, studying the officer. You're not supposed to be here," he muttered. The officer's voice was cold and mechanical. "I was sent to make sure your princess never leaves alive," he said, pointing the lance at the princess. His gaze lingered on her as if he had studied her every move. "Your people should have stayed hidden." The princess stepped forward, fear battling with defiance. "You won't stop us, not while he's here." The human raised his weapon, stepping in front of her. "Stay close," he commanded, his eyes locked on the officer. "No mistakes, not now." The officer lunged, plasma lance crackling, and the human met him head-on. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal. The force of the impact threw both combatants backward, and the princess felt her stomach lurch. She wanted to help, to fight alongside him, but she knew her only role now was to survive, to trust him, as she had so many years ago. "You're stronger than I remembered," the human growled, dodging a lethal strike. "But you'll have to do better than that." The officer snarled, pushing him back with a violent swing. The princess's hands trembled as she gripped a loose pipe from the wall, knowing it was her only chance. She swung it with everything she had, striking the officer in the side. He faltered for a moment, giving the human the opening he needed. With a swift, precise motion, the human disarmed the officer, sending the plasma lance skittering across the floor. He then shoved the officer against the wall, pinning him with brutal strength. "You won't touch her," he said, voice low and fierce. "Not while I'm standing." The officer hissed, a mix of fear and rage flashing across his face. You're the same human from long ago." The princess froze. That memory, fragmented and hazy, surfaced in a rush. The human's presence, his voice, his determination, they all pointed to a truth she had almost forgotten. He had saved her once, yes, but he had also been part of something bigger, something dangerous, something that had marked both their destinies. The officer broke free for a moment, but the human's reflexes were faster. He struck him down with a final, decisive blow. The officer collapsed, sparks and smoke rising from his armor unmoving. The princess stepped closer, her chest heaving. He recognized you," she whispered. "Before he fell, he said your name." The human turned to her, face grim but composed. He remembered too. Some things don't die, no matter how long it's been. A loud explosion shook the deck, and the ship's lights flickered. The navigation core was just ahead, but now the princess understood the stakes. This wasn't just about survival, it was about reclaiming what her people had lost. She had been taught that humans were fragile, unreliable. But this one human had proven her wrong. "Come on," he said, taking her hand. "We move fast, we move together, or we die here." As they sprinted toward the control hub, the princess's mind was flooded with questions. Why had he returned after all these years? How had he found her? And most importantly, what had he sacrificed to be here now, at the exact moment she needed him most? She realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that humans were not just survivors. They were fighters, dreamers, and protectors in ways her people had never understood. And this human, her human, was living proof. The control hub loomed ahead, doors scorched and half destroyed. She and the human moved through it, ready to face whatever new danger awaited. And deep inside, she felt a growing certainty. Whatever lay ahead, she would not face it alone. Because he had saved her once, and now he would save her again. The control hub smelled of burning circuits and ozone. The flickering lights cast long shadows across the consoles, and sparks rained down from the ceiling. The human moved swiftly, pressing buttons, overriding damaged systems, all while keeping a protective arm around the princess. Every second counted. "Almost there," he muttered, his jaw tight. "Just a few more sequences, and we can reroute the engines and jump out of this nightmare." The princess nodded, her hands hovering over a cracked console. "Tell me, how did you find me again, after all these years?" Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the storm of memories stirring inside her. He paused, fingers hovering over the controls. "I never stopped looking. Even when I thought I'd lost you forever, I knew you were out there somewhere, and I promised I'd come back if I could." Her breath caught. She remembered a small, distant planet where she had been a child, cornered by enemies she couldn't fight. She remembered screaming for help, and then light, warmth, safety. He had appeared, carrying her, fighting off impossible odds. At the time, she had been too young to understand, too naive to grasp the courage it took. But now, standing beside him again, the memories returned like a tide she could no longer hold back. Before she could speak, the door to the control hub shuddered violently. Enemy reinforcements had followed them, the shadow cruisers pressing their advantage. Outside, the viewports revealed dozens of armed fighters preparing to board. The human's expression hardened. "We're not alone," he said grimly. "Hold on tight." He grabbed her hand, and together they raced to the central navigation console. Fingers danced across the holographic interface, rerouting power to the escape engines. The princess watched in awe as he worked, realizing for the first time that humans, her human, were not just fragile creatures as her people had believed. They were fast, clever, adaptive, capable of brilliance under pressure. A piercing alarm sounded. One of the enemy fighters had breached the outer hull and was now inside the ship. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and the air shimmered with the heat of the breach. The princess instinctively ducked behind a console as the human fired his plasma rifle, taking down the first wave of attackers with calm precision. "You never miss," she breathed, eyes wide with admiration and fear. He glanced at her, a brief, almost vulnerable smile flickering across his face. "I only miss the ones that matter," he replied softly before diving back into action. They fought side by side, the princess realizing she could trust him completely, even with her life. Each movement was instinctive, a rhythm formed from years of experience, both hers and his. The humans may have been underestimated by her people, but she was beginning to understand that they were capable of greatness beyond imagination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the navigation corps accepted the rerouted commands. The engines hummed to life, a deep, vibrating sound that promised escape. The human grabbed her hand again. "Ready." She nodded, her heart pounding. "Ready." As the ship surged forward, breaking through the shadow cruiser's blockade, the princess allowed herself a moment of reflection. She looked at the human beside her, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude and recognition. He was not just a savior in this moment. He had been her savior once before, in a life she barely remembered but would never forget again. Why did you save me before?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. He looked at her, eyes shadowed with memories. "Because someone had to, because you were important, because you mattered to me." Her chest tightened. She had believed that humans were fleeting, fragile, incapable of the sacrifices her people revered. But this one human, he had crossed galaxies, fought impossible odds, and returned to save her again. He was proof that humanity could rise above fear, above expectation, above even destiny itself. The ship broke through the debris field, the enemy fleet shrinking behind them. Yet even as relief washed over her, a question lingered in her mind. Why had fate brought him back now? Why had he appeared at the exact moment when her people's survival hung by a thread? The human noticed her distant gaze. "We'll figure it out," he said gently, "but for now we survive together." She nodded, her fingers tightening around his. In that moment, she realized something profound. Humans were not just strong in body, they were strong in spirit. And this one human, the one who had saved her twice, embodied everything her people had doubted. As the stars stretched into streaks outside the viewport, the princess felt hope bloom where fear had once lived. She knew the journey ahead would be perilous, filled with enemies, betrayal, and trials she could not yet imagine. But with him by her side, she believed they could face anything. And deep in her heart, she knew this truth. He had always been her savior, and he always would be. The starship shuddered violently as it escaped the shadow cruiser's blockade. Red emergency lights pulsed across the corridors. illuminating smoke-streaked walls and debris scattered from the earlier battle. The princess clutched the human's arm, her heart racing, not from fear this time, but from the knowledge that survival depended on them moving together. "Get to the bridge," the human shouted, his voice firm yet reassuring. "We need to take full control if we're going to get out alive." The princess nodded, determination igniting within her chest. She had been trained to lead, but never in circumstances like this. With the human beside her, she felt stronger, braver, capable of facing the impossible. Every instinct screamed that he was more than just a companion. He was the embodiment of the courage she had once felt as a child, the courage that had saved her life long ago. They ran through corridors warped by explosions. Sparks leapt from damaged conduits and smoke swirled in thick clouds. Alien crew members, dazed and wounded, scrambled to restore systems, but the enemy was relentless. A boarding party had already infiltrated their ship. "Stay behind me," the human instructed, raising his weapon. "Watch my back." The princess's hands shook, but she refused to falter. "I'm not just staying behind," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'll fight, I'll help you." He gave her a brief glance, recognition and respect flickering in his eyes. "Then don't let me down." Moments later, enemy soldiers poured into the corridor. The human fired with precision, each shot taking down threats with deadly efficiency. The princess, guided by his example, swung a metal rod, striking enemies with surprising accuracy. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. Fear was present, yes, but it was tempered by resolve. She felt alive in a way she had never before. "You've got skill," the human shouted, ducking behind a scorched wall to reload. "I've had good teachers," she replied with a faint smile, though her chest heaved with exertion. The fight continued, each step forward a struggle, each breath a battle against smoke and exhaustion. But together they moved with seamless coordination, human and alien, united by circumstance, by trust, and by something far deeper that neither fully understood yet. Finally, they reached the bridge. The sight took the princess's breath away. A massive viewport displayed the enemy fleet closing in, but the ship's weapons systems were partially functional. With effort, they could still turn the tide. "Can we fight them off?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We have to," he said, his gaze fixed on the enemy ships. "But not by brute force alone, we'll have to be clever." The princess's mind raced. Her people had long relied on advanced technology and overwhelming numbers, but she now realized that courage and ingenuity could outweigh both. She glanced at the human, her pulse quickening with a strange, exhilarating certainty. Together, they could do the impossible. "Over here," she said, pointing to the ship's auxiliary weapon systems. "We can use these to create a diversion, if we can hit them in the right spot." He nodded, a spark of admiration in his eyes. "I knew you'd be the one to see it. Let's do it." Working together, they activated the weapons, firing a series of precise blasts that disoriented the enemy fleet. Explosions rippled across the enemy ships, sending them spinning and buying precious time. The bridge shook with every impact, but neither of them wavered. Amidst the chaos, the princess felt a surge of emotion she could not name. Gratitude, awe, and something deeper intertwined in her chest. The human beside her, steady and unflinching, reminded her of the child she once had been, terrified, cornered, and saved by a hero who seemed impossibly brave. And now, that hero was here again, fighting beside her, guiding her, trusting her. The enemy fleet began to falter under their unexpected assault. The princess's heart lifted as hope surged. But even as relief flickered, a lingering question gnawed at her. Why had fate reunited them now, after all these years? What secret from their shared past had led them to this moment? The human glanced at her, reading her thoughts with uncanny precision. "We'll find the answers," he said, voice low but resolute. "First, we survive." She nodded, determination burning in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she fully understood the strength of humans, not just in body but in spirit. And in this human, the one who had saved her twice, she saw proof of everything her people had doubted: courage, loyalty, and the power to change fate itself. The stars outside the viewport streaked past as the ship prepared for a daring jump to hyperspace. The princess gripped the human's hand tightly, silently vowing that no matter what lay ahead, she would face it with him. Because he had been her savior once, and now he would guide them through the flames of this battle and perhaps into a future neither of them could yet imagine. The ship's interior hummed with tension as the echoes of battle faded into a fragile silence. Smoke still curled from scorched panels, and the smell of ozone lingered like a reminder of how close death had come. The princess leaned against the railing of the bridge, her silver hair clinging to her sweat-streaked face. She watched the stars streak past the viewport as the human worked at the controls, rerouting power and checking systems. For a moment the world seemed still, but beneath that quiet the princess felt a growing unease. Something was wrong. Memories she had long suppressed began to rise, shards of a life before this one when she had been a child, alone and terrified. She remembered the human who had saved her, the hero who had disappeared into the chaos of that long-ago battle. And she remembered promises, half-forgotten words, and a sense of destiny she could not fully grasp. "You're quiet," the human said, glancing at her over his shoulder. His voice was calm, steady, but there was an edge of concern. "Thinking about the past." She swallowed hard. I remember more than I thought I would," she admitted. "Faces, voices, feelings. I remember the day you saved me, and something else. Someone betrayed us, someone close." His expression darkened. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he muttered. "But yes, there were shadows we didn't see, enemies hiding in plain sight. I thought I had dealt with them. I was wrong." The princess's heart quickened. "Do you mean the attack, the ambush?" "Yes," he said, voice low. "We were set up. Someone knew we would escape, and someone wanted to make sure we didn't. That betrayal, it almost cost both of us our lives." The realization hit her like a thunderclap. All the fear, all the danger, they hadn't been random. Someone had orchestrated it, and they were still out there. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed the truth. She had trusted her advisors, her fleet, even technology, but she had underestimated human cunning. And now, beside her, she understood the difference. Humans were capable of seeing through deception, of acting when others faltered, of surviving when all seemed lost. The human turned to her, eyes fierce and unwavering. "You have to understand something, princess. Humans, we fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We protect, we endure, we survive. And sometimes we come back for those we care about, no matter how long it takes." She stared at him, her chest tightening. In that moment, the walls around her heart cracked. The fear, the doubt, the loneliness, they all fell away, leaving a raw, unshakable truth. He had saved her once. He had come back. And now he was here again, ready to face betrayal, death, and impossibility by her side. A sudden alert sounded. The enemy fleet, though battered, had regrouped. A shadow cruiser emerged from the darkness, larger and more formidable than any they had faced. Its weapons systems glowed ominously, ready to tear the starship apart. The human's eyes narrowed. "Looks like our shadows are about to catch up with us," he said grimly. The princess clenched her fists. "Then let them come. We won't run, not this time." He nodded, a brief smile flickering across his face. "That's what I like to hear. Humans may be fragile, but we know courage when we see it." Together they prepared for the next confrontation. The princess activated auxiliary weapons, rerouted shields, and coordinated with the remaining crew. Every move was calculated, precise, a testament to her growing courage and determination. But she knew the true strength lay not in technology or strategy, but in the human beside her, the one who had saved her life twice, who had risked everything to be here, who embodied hope, bravery, and an unyielding spirit. As the enemy cruiser drew closer, casting long shadows across the bridge, she took a deep breath. Her mind was clear. Her heart, though anxious, was steady. And she knew one undeniable truth. She would face the shadows of the past, confront the betrayal, and fight for her people, not alone, but with the human who had always been her savior. The ship trembled as the first salvo struck, and the princess braced herself. Yet, even in the midst of fire, smoke, and chaos, there was a light in her heart. A light born of trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond between human and alien. She looked at him, eyes shining with emotion. "We survived this together." He returned her gaze, unwavering. "Together," he confirmed, voice filled with certainty. And in that moment, amidst the heat of battle and the shadows of betrayal, the princess understood the full truth. Courage was not born from strength alone, but from the willingness to stand with someone who believed in you, even when the universe seemed against you. And she had never believed more in anyone than she did in him. The starship shook violently as the enemy cruiser loomed ahead, its weapons locked and ready. The princess stood at the bridge, her silver hair catching the flickering light, her hands steady on the console. Beside her, the human worked with relentless focus, recalibrating shields and targeting systems. Every second counted. Every decision could mean life or death. "This is it," he said, his voice low but firm. "We either fight together or we don't survive." The princess swallowed hard. Memories of her childhood flashed before her. A terrified child on a battlefield, saved by a human she barely understood at the time. Now, standing beside him again, she realized how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The same courage, the same unyielding resolve burned in him, and now it burned in her too. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice strong, determined. The enemy cruiser fired, and the bridge shook as energy blasts tore through the starship's hull. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the princess gritted her teeth. She followed the human's precise commands, activating weapons, diverting shields, and guiding the crew with calm authority. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her role, not just as a princess, but as a leader capable of shaping fate. The human glanced at her, eyes filled with unspoken emotion. "Remember what I told you? Courage isn't just survival, it's fighting even when it seems impossible." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then let's make it impossible for them to win." Together, they unleashed a coordinated assault. The starship's weapons struck with precision, taking out the cruiser's engines and crippling its shields. The enemy soldiers inside the ship faltered as the princess and human moved through the corridors, neutralizing threats with skill, strategy, and trust in each other. In the midst of the chaos, the princess's memories crystallized. She remembered the moment he had first saved her, the sacrifices he had made, and the promise he had kept by returning. She understood now why fate had reunited them, because their bond was stronger than time, stronger than fear, stronger than the forces that sought to destroy them. Finally, they reached the enemy commander, the mastermind behind the ambush and betrayal. The human stepped forward, weapon ready. The princess followed, courage blazing in her eyes. "You've caused enough pain," he said, voice steady. "It ends here." The commander laughed, defiance in his eyes, but the human's resolve was unshakable. With one swift, decisive strike, he neutralized the threat. The princess stood beside him, realizing that together they had not just survived, they had reclaimed destiny. The enemy fleet, now leaderless and disoriented, began to retreat. The princess allowed herself a small smile, relief washing over her. The human glanced at her, and for a brief moment, the war, the danger, and the chaos faded. All that remained was trust, respect, and the bond that had endured across time and space. "You saved me again," she whispered, emotion breaking through her composure. He shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "No," he said softly, "we saved each other, that's what matters." The princess felt tears prick her eyes. She realized that humans were not fragile, not weak, not fleeting. They were capable of extraordinary courage, loyalty, and love. And this human, her human, was proof. Proof that even across galaxies and lifetimes, hope could survive and heroes could return. As the starship drifted through the calm after the storm, the princess took a deep breath. She looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and understanding. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, voice tender, "but I know one thing, I'll face it with you." He nodded, gripping her hand firmly. "And I'll face it with you, always." For the first time in decades, the princess felt truly safe, not because the battle was over, but because she had found a companion whose courage matched her own. Together, they had faced betrayal, darkness, and death. Together, they had rewritten destiny. And as the stars stretched into streaks outside the viewport, she knew the full truth. The human who had saved her once, long ago, was not just a protector, not just a hero. He was the part of her fate she had been waiting for. The ship sailed onward, carrying them toward new worlds, new challenges, and a future they would face together. And in the quiet moments when the hum of the engines was the only sound, the princess allowed herself to finally believe in something she had long forgotten, that hope, courage, and love could endure across time and space. He had been her savior once, And now he would remain by her side, not just a hero, but a partner, a friend, and a bond that no force in the universe could break. Together, human and alien, they stepped into the stars, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. And for the first time, the princess felt truly whole.